Hello friends, I welcome you all to this online session of a compulsory English BSc Part First. In the last session, we have completed a short story. It is also a part of a reading comprehension unit. It was regarding a slave and how slavery is an evil social system is reflected through the short story. That we read line by line and try to understand it. It is written by Danish author Johnson Jensen. The story is titled as a Lost Forest. We learn it in detail. I also posted one question quiz on it. Most of you have also solved it, but most of you still don't have turned towards it. So I request you that you should go to this quiz and try to solve it. It is just like a scanning and scheming type of questions. You are only required to read the story, and try to solve the question paper. So after completing telephonic communication, after completing Lost Forest Johnson Jensen, I have also posted one video on Robert Frost's Stopping by Woods. This is a small poem written by Robert Frost, and it is in fact a very inspirational poem. You can see we came across. So let us now see about the Robert Frost, uh, especially as I told you when we were discussing about Lost Forest. We also discussed in details about Johnson Jensen, his biography. As I told you, that the author's inspirations, motivation, socio-cultural milieu in which he writes also contribute in the meaning making of the text. And as a result of that, we require to understand the socio-cultural milieu of the author, and then only it is possible for us to understand the literary work produced by him, because there are several things, several autobiographical, biographical things reflected in such a kind of writing. So it is always a wise thing to go through the introduction of a author first, and then start reading the text that is prescribed to us. So let us now read about Robert Frost, a very famous American poet. Robert Lee Frost, you can see. He born on 26th March 1874 and died on January 29, 1963. So almost 88 years of age he lived, a very long and illustrative career also he developed in his life. Was an American poet. His work was initially published in England before it was published in the United States. Known for his realistic depiction of a rural life and his command of American colloquial speech. Of course, yes, you can see even in this poem, we get a glimpse of a rural area of a Europe or of a America or of a England. Forrest Frost frequently wrote about settings from rural life in New England in the early 20th century, using them to examine complex social and philosophical themes. So, though the poem that we are supposed to read here, "Stopping by Wood on a Snowy Evening," seems simple, but it is highly philosophical. It reveals a philosophy of a life, in fact. So the Frost was honored frequently during his lifetime, and he is the only poet to receive four Pulitzer prizes for poetry. So this is also to his credit that he has won four Pulitzer prizes for his poetry. So you can understand that whose poetry we were reading. He is a very influential, significant, popular author of early 20th century. He became one of America's rare public literary figures, almost an artistic institution. Of course, yes, you can see he emerged as an artistic institution in his life. He becomes a very popular literary figure in one of the very popular literary figures in America. So he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1960s for his poetic works. On July 22, 1961, First was named Poet Laureate of Vermont. So this is what you can see. Recognition he received in his life. So Robert Frost, if we see his early childhood or early life, you can see he was born in San Francisco, California, of course, US, to journalist William Peter Scott Frost Jr. and Isabella Moody. His father descended from Nicholas Frost of Trewton, Devon, England, who had sailed to New Hampshire in 1634 on the Wolfrena, and his mother was a Scottish immigrant. So this is what you can see: English and Scottish descendant he has. So Frost was a descendant of a Samuel Appleton, one of the early settlers of Ipswich, Massachusetts, and Reverend George Phillips, one of the early settlers of Watertown, Massachusetts. So you can understand that he belongs to a very popular family, a very influential family, in fact. First father was a teacher and later an editor of a San Francisco Evening Bulletin. So he also inherited the writing skill from his father. But you can see it is an unsuccessful candidate for city tax collector. He pursued his career into a journalism. After his death on May 5th, 1885, the family moved across the country of Lawrence, Massachusetts, under the patronage of Robert's grandfather William Frost Sr., who was an overseer at New England Mill. Frost graduated from Lawrence High School in 1892. Frost's mother joined the Swedenborg Church and had him baptized in it, but he left it as an adult. So you can also come across his uh, childhood life. After that, let us see about his literary career. In literary career, uh, if we think about a narrative style and critical response, you can see the poet and critic Reynold Jarrell often praised Frost's poetry and wrote Robert Frost along with Stevens and Eliot seems to me the greatest of American poets of this century. So this Ronald Jarrell, one of the critic of the period, called him as one of the greatest American poets of this century. And first, virtues are extraordinary. No other living poet has written so well about the actions of ordinary men. His wonderful dramatic monologues or dramatic scenes come out of a knowledge of a people that few poets have had, and they are written in the verse that uses something with absolute mastery, the rhymes of actual speech. Of course, as you can see, his observation, his understanding is very important. It is reflected in his poetry. When we read his poetry, we came across the people who were the living creatures on the earth in this century. All the sociocultural milieu in which they exist also influences their mind, and author as a poet, this Robert Frost tried to catch that thing, catch that particular emotions and the relationship, its relationship with the sociocultural milieu. So first, seriousness and honesty in his about his literary art or about his art of a poetry, stating that Faust was a particularly skilled at representing a wide range of human experiences in his poems. Of course, yes, when we read this poem, that is stopping by woods on a snowy evening, we also came across such a kind of experience, and that experience we also go through. So Gerald's notable and influential essays on Frost include the essays Robert Frost Home Burial, which consisted of an extended close reading of that particular poem, and to the Lodiscan, in which Gerald defined Frost against critics who had accused Frost of being too traditional and out of touch with the modern and modernist poetry. So this is what you can see. Mixed response, critical response he received. So we have learned this uh, about this Robert Frost, American poet. His poems are simple and easy to understand. His poems are symbolic, and have a universal appeal. The poem is about contemplation of a nature. This is also a very important thing. And many times when we see a natural scenery, we also feel contemplative. We get into a contemplative mood. So this poem also is in a contemplative mood. It describes the beauty of dark, deep and lovely woods, snowflakes, frozen lake in the winter evening. He is fascinated by the beautiful sight he wishes to stay there forever. However, he reminds himself that despite the loveliness of the view, he has to go. So, this is what the poem is about. The poem has a symbolic meaning. The poet is lost in the beauty of nature. We are also many times lost in the beauty of nature, especially when it is a spring. Today also, or in these days also, you can see nature is very beautiful. He wishes to enter the dark woods, which is suggestive of a last journey. Sleep is symbolic of death, but he is taken back by the sound of harness bell that reminds him of his promises. So, this is the experience of every human being we came across in our life. The poem has a universal appeal. So, this is what we are supposed to read in this poem. So first, we will read this poem in detail, and then we will try to understand its meaning. But it is very important to read the poem first. And this is a very small poem. It is not very big. It is a small incident, in fact, in which author or the poet feel contemplative. Let's read first the poem, and then we will try to understand and analyze this. So let us read. It is only run for only a four stanza poem. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is the village, though. He will not see me stopping here, watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year, he gives his harness a bell, a shake, as to ask if there is some mistake. There is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep. So this is a very small poem, in fact, by Robert Browning, but it is a very interesting poem. See, I will summarize it. The speaker of this poem thinks about who owns the wood that he or she is passing through and is fairly sure of knowing the landlord. So he knows the landlord well who is living in the village. However, the owner's home is far away in the village, and thus he is physically incapable of seeing the speaker pause to watch the snowfall in the forest. So, this is what the first line or first stanza is reflect. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So this is what the first stanza means. So he has stopped there to see a natural beauty, and at the same time he is also thinking about the owner of the field, and he assure himself, in fact, that the owner's house is in the village, and physically he cannot see him, that he has stopped there to see his woods. So this is what the first stanza is. Then second stanza, the speaker thinks his or her horse must find it strange. Pure means strange. Find it pure strange to stop so far from any sign of a civilization. So there is no civilization, there is no house, there is no town, there are no people. They were in middle of a uh, wintry evening in a snowfall, you can see, and such a kind of experience is mesmerizing for a speaker, but his or her how horse must find it strange to stop so far from any signs of civilization. Indeed, they are surrounded only by the forest and a frozen lake on the longest night of the year. So this is also a very interesting thing to know, that indeed they are surrounded only by the forest. There is no human being. And in such a kind of situation, you can see we also feel a contemplative. So the mood is different when we were all alone in the beauty of a in the premises of a beautiful nature. So this is what you can see is the analysis or the summary of the second stanza. My little horse must think it cure. Cure means strange. To stop without a farmhouse near. So there is no farmhouse near. So little horse must think that it is a cure, that why master has stopped here. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. So this is what you can see. And this poem is very interesting to understand, because it is or also interesting that we can immediately memorize it due to cure, year, no, snow kind of a rhyming scheme. So my little horse must think it cure to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. So this is the second stanza. See the third stanza. Narrator here. The horse shakes the bells on its harness, as if asking if the speaker has made a mistake by stopping. The only other sound beside the ringing of these bells, you can understand, is that of a wind and falling snowflake, which the speaker likens to the fathers of goose down. So this is what you can see is the analysis or summary of the third stanza. It is also very simple. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. So this is what uh, again he is thinking about the emotions of the horse. And the last stanza you can understand like this: the speaker finds the woods very alluring, drawn both to their darkness and how vast and all encompassing they seem. So this is the description of a forest. Woods are lovely, dark, and deep. Uh, this is what he is describing. However, the speaker has obligations to fulfill elsewhere. Thus, though he or she would like to stay and rest, the speaker knows there are many more miles to go before that will be possible. So the last stanza is: the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So this is the last stanza, and this is the summary of the full text. So we will stop here and continue the same in the next session. Thank you for listening.